Hello everybody and welcome to the third webinar as part of this September webinar series. Today I'm joined by brothers James Bach and John Bach, and they're going to talk to you today about thinking through your role. And if you have any questions for James or John, please type them into the questions field there on your control panel, and at the very end of the webinar we will go through as many of the questions as we can. And remember as well, you don't have to wait until the very end of the webinar. You can type your questions at any point. So now let me hand you over to James and John. Hello.
Hey, Derek.
Hi. Okay, now I can turn that down. Okay, I'm ready to go. All right, folks, welcome to our webinar. My brother and I are excited to bring this to you. We've been doing a lot of thinking about the evolution of the role of the tester across the industry and the various sub-industries. And we've got some ideas for you. The first thing we want to do, though, is my brother is going to tell his story of how he was hired as a test director at eBay and then over the years has evolved and reinvented his role. So I'll run the slides and John, go to it.
All right, thanks, James. Hi, everybody. So me and my brother get a chance to talk to each other when we see each other at conferences, obviously. We say hi and we usually talk shop. And I talk about my role, what's happening at eBay for me, and he talks about his projects and consulting. And we talk about the pattern that we see in our industry toward DevOps and Agile, and compare notes. Last year we were talking, I think it was at Star West, and as I talked about what was happening at eBay, he was noticing patterns, and he had some questions about my evolving role from when I started, as he said, 5 years ago as a test manager, a test director. So we began to talk about this concept of reinvention and finding patterns and things that we had in common, he saw in his projects and I saw in my projects, that we could talk about and offer. So I wanted to go through a quick lightning talk, so to speak, of what has happened to me since 2011. And so here's the road in front of me. So as I started as a QE director for search, and the front end of search, there's a back end of search and there's search science, opportunities emerged. So there's opportunities to reinvent myself. And as you see above each of these little objects, the green arrow indicates that it's me taking an opportunity in a yellow starburst like that is the opportunity was kind of made for me. We're going through a reorg, for example, so I don't have that much choice. But in every one of these different roles that emerged is an opportunity for me to say, well, here's the hand I was dealt, what I'm going to do with it. Okay, so starting as a director of search front end, and then I'll walk through each of these little roles in the following slides. Okay, so I've had 6 different roles. Okay, here's how I started. And I'm going to diagrammed it like this. So the green circle is a person and an actor, and a triangle is a task. Okay, so when I started, me, the big green circle, had a mission to manage these 8 quality engineers. And of course, I'm new, so I want to establish trust and credibility. So the orange tasks were, those come from me. Those were my judgment of what I felt that role expected of me. So like collaborating with peers, coaching my team, serving my team, taking on stuff they need me to do, unblocking issues, partnering with other teams like Search Backend is a completely different team. Understanding the other role players and who are the other teams. But there was really only one blue triangle in this diagram, and that is, okay, John, manage. I was given a pretty loose leash in terms of tasks. But that was the meta task, was manage this team. Learning about tools and techniques, all these things you can imagine if you were starting as a test manager on a project. Okay, about 6 months in, an opportunity opened up for me, hence the green arrow here, to be the director of what was called live site quality, and that is end-to-end systems thinking of how search front-end interacted with search back-end, and also
Jane
how it interacted
and
with...
John. I'm very sorry for
Yes.
jumping in there and interrupting you very briefly.
Sure.
It just appears there, James, on your slide, your control panel is just slightly overlapping onto your PowerPoint. You may need to refresh the PowerPoint. I can still see it there now. I just noticed one or two comments coming through, so perhaps you might need to close the PowerPoint and reopen it and see if it makes any difference.
Okay. That's good. I want everybody to see the full...
Yes, it's important to get the whole screen in. It's still appearing there for some reason. May need to drag down to the bottom of the slide out of view.
There we go. Is that better?
I'm trying to get rid of this thing, but it doesn't want to go away. Thank you.
That's okay.
Go to webinar.
How's
I wonder
that,
if they have a test manager.
It's still slightly appearing. I think you can drag the whole panel to the very bottom right of your screen and you won't see. And now it seems to have disappeared now.
Oh, awesome.
Okay, and apologies for interrupting, and I'll let you guys get back to it.
No problem. That's a good interruption. Okay. So this opportunity opened up to be the director of what was known as live site quality, of how teams work together with each other, how search front end works for the search back end, how the view item team at eBay might need to work with the selling team, or the deals team, or the promotions team. So there was also some other roles to connect with customers and raise awareness about quality and help teams cooperate and cultivate this notion of what testing could be and should be at eBay. So that was an opportunity. I took 6 months after joining eBay, 6 months after managing my team. So it gives you an idea of some bigger things. And then a reorg happened, and there is an opportunity that put me on a team called End-to-End Solutions, which is really germane to my work in live site quality. It was a team that was building a tool that tested end-to-end, so from starting with finding an item on the site using search to buying an item and going through checkout. That's one possible flow, of course, on eBay. There's hundreds of flows, thousands of flows. So I was the blue triangles, again, at least for me in this diagram, those were the expectations, as I was to be Scrum Master for this team, come up with these scenarios of how people might use the site and how we might procedurally script and automatically run these testing ideas, and run what's called an out-of-service level agreement program, or USLA. We had these issues that were overdue to be fixed, and I would work with teams to make a report about what was expected, when fixes were expected to be managed to the site. But I also did things like triage bugs and demo products, and I had some other things that I felt I needed to do in that role. So here comes another reorg. Now it's 2014. Remember, I started in 2011. Now it's 2014, and this role was basically not a choice of mine. This was a role that I was put onto a totally different team. The end-to-end solutions team was disbanded, and out of a business need to handle something called Commerce OS, which is an initiative internally to standardize on code frameworks and platform. And my main task was to evangelize these framework standards. So I felt that it also was important to coordinate with documentation teams and make the standards easy to use, do some usability around the standards, how engineers use the standards. And then a new task was given to me to analyze and drive environment fidelity, which was completely antithetical, I thought, to Commerce OS, but it was something my manager wanted me to do.
John,
And
can I ask you a question?
yes,
So is this stuff testing? Is this stuff related to testing?
and that's one thing I want to call out, James, that to everybody, that this is the kind of questions that you ask me from time to time when we see each other at conferences. What does this have to do with testing? And that's the fascinating conversations that we get into. Testing is part analysis. It's discovery. It's reporting. It's everything that I got my journalism degree for. It's the pursuit of truth. It is informing others about possible risks. It's developing experiments to anticipate risks and things that are likely to go wrong, even though it is not a testing role at all. It's all about notions of quality and what we could and should be. So as these opportunities open up and for me, it's partly here's what they want me to do and here's what I want to do. I became a quality evangelist in 2015, got out of the Commerce OS PM role. I was basically a quality PM, and somebody I really wanted to work with happened to have an opening saying, we need you over here. So he said, you can be a quality evangelist, and here's what I want you to do. And he gave me all these things. I want you to look for patterns and practices, John. I want you to create a quality-centric newsletter. I want you to plan and coordinate events. And I'm like, I want to do all those. Those are really cool. So my role is emerging. Hopefully you see the themes of quality through this, of discovery and reporting and asking questions about how we can be better and what we need to do.
And these things down here, they mean that people are working for you?
These are people on my team. So the square, the bigger square is my broader team, and these other guys are on my team and they have other stuff to do. And they're supporting me or I'm supporting them. Okay, next. This is my most current role. So currently in March we had another reorg. So this is now for the current year, and it was working for one of the peers on my team, one of those little squares that James just pointed out. She went from my colleague to my manager. And I thought that was appropriate because she was made the engineering excellence lead because of her experience at eBay, and I totally didn't have a problem with that. We got along really well, and she didn't really have many expectations from me. She allowed me to create whatever role I wanted to do in defining what engineering excellence really means. And so you're looking at some of those bullet points right now. But then she said, there is an opportunity to help with agile transformation. Would you be willing to do that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So that's one of the things that she's definitely wanted me to do. And then, of course, aligning efforts and other initiatives and things like that. But all of this, hopefully you see the patterns here with lifecycle quality and quality evangelism and whatever the evolution you've seen so far in the slides. But to anchor all of this, part of the thing that I came up with for myself working with my peers is this notion of turning engineering excellence from just rhetoric that you might hear an executive say, well, what does engineering excellence really mean? And I came up with this framework that it's code, which is what we produce, all kinds of aspects of how we think about improvement and notions of value around code. What about the when? When do we release? How do we know we're ready? It's all about readiness there. All kinds of things I can help teams with in thinking about release. Capabilities is the how. These are the standards and practices or tools that enable us to do things. And there's culture, who is the who. That's what gets rewarded, what gets punished. How do we recognize achievement, the spirit and ethos of eBay. And lastly, production, which is the where. Where does all of this show up? And how do we do testing in production? How do customers feel about what we're releasing? All these have testing angles that I invite you to call out in this presentation through the chat window here and say, either ask me, how is that related to testing like James, or here's how I think it might be related to testing, because James and I want to help you think through your role especially if you're pressured to go to DevOps or be a software design engineer and test or become a programmer, and we feel like you don't have to lose your testing acumen. In fact, you can enhance it like I tried to do. So James, this is a slide I came up with about how the tester fits in parallel, the testing role fits in parallel to what I did. And how would you anchor that with what you'd like to talk about?
Well, it looks like this slide is your attempt to answer the question I kept asking you as we were running up to our Reinventing Testers class, which is, what does this have to do with testing? And I think you've done a real good job here of finding the resonances, because you could say that in a simplistic way, testing is a process of finding bugs before it's too late. And that is true. That's a true statement. Anyone who says testing is something else that doesn't include finding bugs before it's too late has sadly lost the thread. Because whatever else testing is, it's got to be finding problems before it's too late. Otherwise, you have to invent some new word that means finding.
Sorry for interrupting again. Ironically, you're speaking of finding bugs before it's too late. I see there's a little white box appearing on the bottom of your slide again there.
It's that silly thing that I can't get rid of, but I can move it over to the side here.
Oh, yeah, that's better, James.
Great, as low as I can get it. I wish I could just make it disappear, but it won't.
It normally does disappear. There seems to be a glitch on the actual software itself. Not your fault, but apologies for jumping in and out and interrupting you. But
Thank you.
No problem. I'll let you get back to it.
But so this slide's important because this is what caused James and I to think, we should make a seminar on this, on reinvention, because John, you haven't stopped being a tester in spirit. I may have stopped the active pursuit of finding bugs every single day or managing people who do, but for the first time we put on a class in May and learned a lot about the concept of roles, even by virtue of the slide, of what are the parallels, and we wanted to leave you with something that helps you rethink your role and reinvent yourself. So,
well, John, some people would say, when being asked, what is the spirit of testing? If it isn't finding bugs, if that's included in testing, but not the fundamental spirit of testing, what is the spirit? I think many people would say the spirit is achieving quality, improving the product, excellence, and I vigorously disagree with that. That actually is sort of an antithesis of testing. It's certainly a dangerous and toxic, in my view, attitude about testing. But I would say that testing, and what you have here and what you are doing, I would say, is that you have seen that the spirit of testing could be fairly stated as a process of optimizing attention, of helping our clients pay attention to the things they need to pay attention to. As a tester, I am no more expert at knowing what how the product ought to be designed as anybody else. There's nothing special about my testing skills that allows me to tell people you should design it this way, this should be the line of code instead of that line of code. I mean, that's development, that's design, and sure, I have opinions about that, but I'm an amateur. But where testing achieves its kind of essence, you might say, is in journalism, because if you think about it, what is journalism but helping the public optimize their attention, to decide that man bites dog is more noteworthy than dog bites man, to decide what goes on the front page, to decide what the headlines are. So I feel that you have stuck to the spirit of testing, and that there is this thread going through the things you just described of helping your organization optimize their attention, to pay attention to the things that matter, to get rid of the things that people believe that aren't true, and to discover the unseen things that are true, that are important. And that's related to journalism, and that's fundamental to testing too. It's also fundamental to science. So it's a way to generalize what testing is about without accidentally just saying, I'm just like a developer. And what is a developer? Someone who's trying to create wonderful quality products. And when people do that, what I'm worried about is that they just say, oh, well, I'll study development, I'll be a developer, and all of testing culture, which is about critical thinking, which is about penetrating mysteries, all of that culture gets lost when people just say, I'm a member of the team. So I'm glad that you have found that thread, and I think this slide, you've shown that in this slide. Storytelling, discovery, and some of the mechanics of testing that you have preserved in your work. Is that how you feel too?
Yeah, this is an echo of conversations that we've had over the years, that you've always grounded that and helping me feel better when I felt like, oh, I'm not a tester anymore. I love testing more. You help me see these patterns that I've still got the spirit of what it's all about, and that's optimizing attention. So I appreciate the recognition of that. It's helpful.
Okay, let me move on to the next slide. I want to show you a few things, folks, that go along with this that will help you think through your role as a tester, or actually your role as in anything. First of all, when I talk about role, when John and I are talking about roles, there's different things we could mean by that in the English language, but the thing we're focusing on is number 2 here, which is a task associated with a contract. The idea that something needs to be done and somebody agrees to do it, and thus a role is born. Now that role might be temporary, that role might be shared with other people, it might be a permanent role, it might be an exclusive role. But that's what we're talking about when we say role. Now, John and I worked for quite a number of hours analyzing what are the elements of a role. And so here is a document, and you see there's a link there that you can go look up that link, and you'll find a nice little one-page document that has this information with a little bit more information in it that, in our view, systematically walks through what it is that you need to think about if you want to think through your role. Now, this is true even if you believe that there shouldn't be a testing role. You know, some of you think maybe we shouldn't have testers, maybe just everybody should test. Well, if you believe that, then you still need to say, okay, well, there still is testing-like tasks that need to be done. So who is going to do those? How do we know they do them? And I would challenge you to go through these categories. Ask yourself, if you have a testing role, what is the scope of that testing role? What is the power and authority of that testing role? What are the things that they control or don't control? I visited a company, a very agile company in Germany last year, and right in the middle of a class where we were trying to do some testing, we lost control of the test platform. It was yanked away from us by development, and I couldn't believe it. And the test manager there said, oh, in this company, nobody owns the platform, so anyone who wants to take it away from anyone else at any time can just do it. Well, why don't you just write a script that takes it back again? I mean, that's what I would do. As soon as you tell me that nobody owns something, then that means I own it. I own it all the time until somebody complains, and then we can talk about what's reasonable in terms of who ought to control things at different times. This company paid me a lot of money to show up and teach them, and then right in the middle of the class had to stop because some random person in their organization who didn't know or maybe didn't care that there was a testing class going on just took the resources away from us that I needed to do my work. This is my problem when people say, let's not have roles, let's just have people spontaneously cooperating with each other. Because ever since we all lived in the trees in Africa 3 million years ago, that hasn't worked. We have had to create formalisms and rituals of power sharing. Now we have the value of the role, the cost of the role, the requirements, what does the role need? But here's something that the last two at the bottom are particularly interesting, and I want you to think about them. And one is openness, because some people, when they think about roles, they immediately think that the role is closed. They say silos. How many of you out there say, oh, we don't want roles because we don't want silos? Well, what a silo is a closed role. A role where people are not allowed to come in and help you. They're not encouraged to come in and help you. You can't share it with other people in any way. And I think that you can have a very productive testing role that's an open testing role that has some informality to it, that has some interruptibility to it. And I think that there are a lot of Agile groups out there that have testing roles that are serious and useful testing roles, but they're not necessarily silos, or they're not silos. But we have to watch out, because things can be turned into silos through a number of different means and for a number of different reasons. And some reasons for turning something into a silo, sometimes those are good reasons. For instance, have you noticed that when you get on an airliner, you can't just go into the cockpit and say, I want to help you fly the plane. They just don't let you do that. That is a closed role. And there's real good reasons for having a cockpit silo in that case, because things have to happen in a very specific way, and you don't want people sharing it in a way where, whoops, the right things didn't happen. In fact, there are actual crashes of jet aircraft that have happened because people have attempted to casually share the role of flying the airplane. And finally, the bottom one there is presence. And it pays for us to think of, as we're thinking through our roles, if you have a role, how does that role show up against other roles? What I mean is, do I have to think about somebody else's role when I'm doing my role? Do I have to worry about how I am affecting them or impacting them? If so, that means that their role has a presence in my role. And that obviously could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, but it's definitely something that we need to think about, is the disruptiveness of our role on other people's roles. And some people feel that a good reason to get rid of testing as a role is that testing is disruptive, because testers are complaining all the time, and that's not fun. And so why don't we make them part of the development team, and then they'll stop their whining. Of course, there's a danger that if you make them part of the development team, they stop their complaining, but they also stop their testing. And then you don't get the value of that independent point of view. Now look at the other side here, and you see 4 big categories, and these are the expectations of actors. And when I say actor, what I mean is a person who is playing a role. So this is my big concern when people say we don't really need testers on a team, because what I say to that is, then how do you manage the commitment of energy to the process of testing? Because now you have people who do testing as one of 100 things they do, or one of 6 things they do. I used to have the role of testing when I developed video games many years ago, and guess what? I spent a lot more time coding than I did testing. A lot more time. Testing was something I didn't like to do. It interrupted me in developing the features I needed to ship. So whenever there was a choice between testing and development, I just went into development. I have that experience, and that's one reason why I'm concerned about this. The second thing is competence. I'm concerned about people who don't study testing. I'm concerned about people who just shrug and say, when it's time to test, I guess I'll figure it out. But there are a lot of interesting techniques and tools, methods of organizing your test data and producing your test data that can be a bit complicated. And unless you think about them, practice, and improve your bag of tricks over time, you're going to do shallow testing. No matter what it is you test, it's going to be shallow instead of deep. Of course, I've dedicated my entire career to testing, and John's dedicated, a good 10 years totally to testing. So we've worked a lot on our competence, and we know what that means. I'm worried about new generations of testers that are all into the Agile stuff, but they never come to understand what it means to do deep testing. Now those two things are interesting, but what I'm most worried about is this one right here, readiness. And here is the big problem I have. If you don't have somebody who's assigned to a role of testing, then that person, even if testing is part of their role, probably will not anticipate the testing needs that are coming up in 3 months. They probably won't be thinking 3 months before they start testing, oh, let's see, what kind of equipment do I need? What kind of data are we going to have to put together? Of course, it's possible that they could do this, but what I seem to see is that when somebody has a role of member of the team and they're supposed to do design and they're supposed to do development and they're supposed to do testing, they're thinking about all these other things that so distract them that they simply don't have the time or the focus to become ready to do the excellent testing that they might otherwise become ready to do if that was their sole role. And this is a major reason why people have roles in the world, is to anticipate problems coming down the line instead of just respond to them when they run into you. So that might be helpful for you, even if you disagree with me or John and I on what you think about testing as a role. We're hoping that you will find that these categories are useful to construct a better argument, a better analysis of whatever your point of view is about the testing role. Okay, now we want to tell you about something that John and I invented. Let me see if I'm seeing now that this silly thing is once again in the way. Can I move it? Can I move it over here? Can I auto hide? What if I say hide control panel? What will happen then? It seems to be kind of hidden. Okay. All right, that's not supposed to happen. Let me get rid of my Skype. Sign out. All right. Okay, go away. All right, back to this. There we go. All right, we want to show you something called Rolegrams. All right. Now, Rolegrams. This is as good as I can do on that silly thing. What Rolegrams are is a form of diagramming that my brother and I invented one night when we were preparing for our class. And it's a diagramming technique that we use to talk about roles. And we want to show you right now, John, unmute yourself now. We want to show you an example of some Rolegrams and then we'll explain them. Okay? Let's try that. Okay. Okay, what you see here, what I'm going to play for you here is a series of diagrams, and each of these is a rolegram. Are you there, John? Because I'm not hearing you. Oh, John says GoToMeeting has frozen for him, so I guess he's going to try to get back in. But I'll go through this rolegram thing. What you see here is a picture, and what this is a story of the evolution of a testing role. What you see here is 4 circles. The 4 circles represent 4 testers. These 4 testers have a task, which is testing. They're testing the current build. That's this hexagon out here. See this rectangle? The rectangle stands for their agreement that they are going to do testing. So anytime you see a rectangle in a rolegram, it means this is a contract. And anytime you have a triangle, are you there, John?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah,
Sorry about
I got your Skype on my other computer.
Awesome.
Too.
Thanks.
Okay, so the triangle represents our agreement that we're going to do testing. Here are these 4 people. They're working together on this. Now, look what happens. This is very common. What this kind of fuzzy dashed line means, these are also contracts, but these are fuzzy contracts, and these are open contracts. The fuzziness of them is the wavy line, and the dashed line means they're open, which means people can come and go. So what you often find when 4 people decide to hit to do the same task together is each person might choose a different part of that task and say, I'll take care of this for now. I'll do this. Maybe I'll work on that. At first, these little sub-roles might be extremely informal. They might even be completely unspoken. This guy just does back-end stuff because he feels like it. And this guy doesn't know coding, so he does front-end. And this guy always likes to write tools, so that's what he's doing. And over here, this is the weird data guy who likes using Excel to construct data. And they might help each other. One person going over here to help him, and they move around. John did this cool thing during our class where he spent like an hour making these little cutouts of Post-its where he made circular Post-its and triangular Post-its. And that meant that we could just move these little circles around on the whiteboard. It was really cool. And we could tell stories about this person going over here, he's walking over here to help him, and that sort of thing. So whenever you have 4 people who are told to do exactly the same thing, you're usually going to find that they won't do exactly the same thing, that they focus on some different part of the task. Now in this evolution of the diagram, what you see is that the dashed lines have disappeared. So what that means is that maybe these guys get so into what they're working on that they stop helping each other. They get really absorbed in their work, and no longer do they go back and forth and say, I feel like working on the back end today, please let me help you, and that kind of thing. Now, John, do you see what's happened here?
Well, now the squiggly line is now a solid line, which means it's a very firm contract and commitment by each of those 4 people to do their individual thing. But there appears to be a triangle that has a wiggly line. That's what we call them, a wiggly line, which means that it's...
I'm calling it fuzzy.
Oh, fuzzy. Okay. So now... Okay, good. We went from squiggly to wiggly to fuzzy.
Triangle.
This is very important. If it's a fuzzy triangle, which means it may not be defined yet, but it's something that it's inside another box, the overall team box, which means the team still has to do that. It's just not defined exactly how to do that particular thing.
Okay.
That's how I interpret that.
Okay, it's a little, I meant something a little different by the diagram. And by the way, folks, the reason why I had John just say that is John and I are practicing writing rolegrams and then giving them to the other guy and then saying, what am I trying to tell you with this rolegram? And we're kind of evaluating the ambiguity of the rolegrams and experimenting with different things we can say. Here's what I was actually trying to say, John. I was trying to say that these guys up here had a definite goal that they were working toward, which is test the product, right?
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to say here is they've lost sight of that goal. That instead, the back-end guy has back-end testing, and the front-end guy has front-end testing, and the automation guy has that tool he's supposed to write, and the test data guy has the test data he's supposed to get into the database, right? And each of them, there's a danger that each of them gets his head down. And even though that's all supposed to add up to test the product, there's a danger that they begin losing sight of that. And there's a word for that. It's called goal displacement. Goal displacement means that you seem to have a goal, but you have accidentally turned that into a little task that you assume will fulfill the goal, but maybe it doesn't fulfill the goal. So I'm trying to show that their common goal of testing the product has now become potentially fuzzy. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, this might happen when you make an edict that bugs have SLAs, service level agreements, need to be fixed by a particular time, and you may inadvertently just try to meet the goal by doing whatever it takes to close that bug instead of really fixing that bug on time.
Right. You start working for the metrics instead of...
Yeah, you work for the metrics instead of the point of not being late with the promises that we make to fix things.
Right. So now you have this next iteration is these guys, maybe they realize that when they focus on their individual work, they might lose sight of some big picture. So now to try to solve that, they use a crowdsourcing or beta testing type process where, in other words, they've turned their contract to test into an open contract that lets other people in. And they say, come in and help us test, and maybe that will help us mitigate the risk that we'll forget to test something important. And a lot of teams do that kind of thing with their beta testers, is to use the beta testers to help alert us if there's some big thing that our test team hasn't accounted for.
Yeah, when you first showed this to me, I thought that the fuzzy triangle was a test report, an overall team report that they were supposed to be doing and weren't really doing because they were focused on testing their little triangles and their little boxes.
Oh, you mean a test reporting task?
Yeah, and a test reporting task. And some people outside the team would say, hey guys, what's going on? And it's because nobody on the team was reporting their testing status. So people would come in and get the information they needed and they'd go out again, hence the dotted line.
Well, it could also mean that, actually. And here's why there's that ambiguity, John, because I didn't label the triangle. Yeah. I could have labeled the triangle and saved you the trouble of guessing what it is. And I think in Rolegrams that you make on a whiteboard, you'd just be talking back and forth and explaining it. But if you're going to send a Rolegram to somebody else, you better label stuff. And I didn't do that here, so no wonder you didn't see that.
Well, it was an exercise.
So here we have a new innovation, which is the testers have decided to create a status board so that they can keep up on each other's progress. And the status board is a hexagon. A hexagon stands for what's called a boundary object. And a boundary object is an object, a thing, an artifact, which mediates between roles. So a bug report is a boundary object, software is a boundary object, status report is a boundary object, and in this case, the status board is used by each of the testers for themselves within their role, but then they realized the same status board could also be a report to people outside the team as well. So there you have an example of Rolegrams, and now let's explain a little bit about what you just saw. There's four kinds of things there: the rectangle, circle, triangle, and the hexagon. Those are so far the only four things we use, but we're thinking about other things we might add to this. And we also use little wavy lines, or I think it's easier to say fuzzy, because fuzzy also means indistinct, and that's what we're trying to convey. If we have a fuzzy contract, we mean it's unspoken, it's vague, it's informal, it is debatable, and dashed means it's open, meaning people can come and go, somebody can leave or arrive. You know, an example of an open contract might be washing the dishes. You might say, it doesn't matter who washes the dishes, but if you decide to wash the dishes, then it's important to do it right, and you are committing while you wash the dishes to put the right things in the right place and to use soap and to dry the dishes in the right way and then put them away properly. So even though you can say, I don't want to wash the dishes today, if you decide to enter into washing the dishes, then that becomes a contract while you're doing it that requires things of you. So an open contract is a real contract. And then you have different kinds of tasks. You can have a formal task, a fuzzy task that might be quite informal or unsystematic, or a conditional or optional task if it's dashed. And we put these things together in different ways. And the circles, the circles are also important. A solid circle is a socially competent actor. Now, when I say socially competent actor, one way to read that is not a machine. A socially competent actor has to be a human. I don't care how much you like Siri, she is not socially competent. She sounds nice, but she's not socially competent. But if an actor could, in principle, be replaced by a machine or a tool, then we can make that as a dashed circle to remind ourselves that if a human does this, it's because it's convenient, it's because we don't have a tool at the moment, but that particular role is not a role that requires social competence. Now we're going to get to the brass tacks here, and I'm almost done with this, guys. We're almost Dara. This is the last slide before I want to go to questions. Thinking with rolegrams. So if you want to think with rolegrams, this is the cool thing about rolegrams. If you see a triangle, then you can say, well, if there's a triangle and there's no circle next to it, then you're talking about a task that nobody is doing. If you have a triangle and there's no rectangle around it, you can say, well, it's a task and somebody might even be doing it if there's a circle next to it. But without a rectangle, it means it's not a duty. It's not a contract. That person can just abandon that task anytime they want if there's no rectangle around it. And when you see a circle, you can say, what is this guy doing? Where are his triangles? And if you see a square, you can say, well, that looks like a contract, but a contract with who? And a contract to do what? So what John and I found as we were making these symbols on the whiteboard and moving them around with Post-its and such is we realized that the diagramming method kind of helped us to see missing bits. And whenever we tried to say these two people are going to share this task, we started thinking, but how are they going to share the task? And is one person required to do something different than another person? Well, that means you have to put a rectangle around them. Now we have to ask, is it a fuzzy rectangle? Is it a formal agreement? A hard rectangle? And,
these are very, sorry Dave, these are really important questions when you go through a reorg, when you want to do something different in your company, when you're forced to do something different in your company. Just like testing software, you can sit down and ask questions about your role that you are given or want to do, or invent something important that you think is an unmet need in your company, in your project. And that's what's fun about sharing this with you, is to see, is this helpful to something that you may be going through right now?
Yeah, and these kinds of conversations, we need to have them. These conversations about here's a task, and we don't need to assign it to anybody because it'll just get done magically, harmoniously, because someone will just decide to do it at some point, and we don't need to talk about it. I really worry about that sort of thing. I don't think it works very well. I don't think I can take my two dogs and say, well, I don't need to feed them because maybe someone else will see that they're hungry and someone else will feed them. I'll just release my dogs into the neighborhood and they'll be fine. I don't think my neighbors would appreciate me releasing my dogs and assuming that they will feed themselves or get fed. And I feel the same way about tasks as well in a project. I believe in excellence, and I know that excellence doesn't happen by accident. So when I'm on a project, I need to know what's my stuff and what's not my stuff. And if I do share something with someone, I need to know how to resolve conflict with them, and we need an established protocol for that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Unless, of course, the only people you work with are your best friends and lovers, then I guess maybe it'll be all right. But I don't think most of us dwell in such a utopia. Okay, I think we are done enough examples here. Dara, we can do some questions here.
Great. Thank you very much, James and John, for your presentation, and apologies for interrupting you there once or twice along the way. I just have one or two slides just to mention here before we look at your questions. And if you have your questions and you haven't already typed them, please do so now. John will be joining us at Eurostar this year. He's also a member of the program committee. We're delighted to have him. And he will be doing a track talk on Tuesday. And the title of the talk will be Reinventing Your Testing Role. And if you'd like,
yeah,
sorry,
it's good.
John.
It's more like, yeah, it's all right. Thank you. It's meant to be a workshop to help you figure out what are the meanings and purposes of your roles on projects. What are the potential roles of skilled testers on projects, no matter what the job title is, and how you can even create or preserve a testing culture. So it's meant to be a longer workshop. You can see that the duration there is a little bit longer than a track talk, but it's meant to be interactive and help you with some of these questions.
Excellent. And we hope you'll come along and attend this talk. It'll be very interesting. And right now, up until next Friday, you can still avail of our early bird discount of 10%. So right now is the cheapest time you can buy your tickets for Eurostar, but this offer is only available until next Friday. We have another discount as well, which is available all year round. It's our group discount. And here, if you buy 4 tickets, you get 1 ticket absolutely free. We have 2 more webinars this week as part of the September webinar series. Tomorrow morning, we have Hybe Schultz talking to you about practical test strategy using heuristics. And then to wrap up the series, we have Penny Resnick, who will be talking to you about testing cloud native applications. And all the links you'll need for this is over on the Huddle website. And if you want to check out the discounts we have for Eurostar, then head over to the Eurostar Conferences website. So now let's take a look at some of your questions that have come through here. The first question I have for you guys asks, does open mean generalist?
No, not at all. That's not at all what it means. Open means you can come and go. That's what it means.
Okay, let's take a look at some more questions here. Just get my control panel open here again. It disappeared on me. What do you have to say to SAP functional consultants who believe they can achieve what a professional tester can do?
What do I say that again?
Sure.
What do I say to who?
SAP functional consultants.
Okay. I've never met any SAP functional consultants, so I haven't heard any of them say, I can do what a professional tester can do. But I think my reaction to it is, aren't you just the cutest thing? Don't kids say the darndest things? People who've never studied a craft, they have no reputation, they've done no work to strive for excellence in that craft, and they casually say that they can do as well as people who have sweated and built their skills and practiced in that craft. That is just the cutest thing.
Another question here mentions, with roles aside, Rolegrams seems like a nice way to visualize the output of task analysis. Would you consider them for this purpose?
Well, well, sure. The idea of the Rolegrams. Oh, by the way, John, I'm hogging the microphone, but feel free.
Oh, it's okay.
To jump in. All right.
I'm thinking about what I'm saying. I think in terms of task analysis, we have these things called triangles, and they're tasks, and you could talk about them in terms of, well, are they meta tasks? Are they specific little to-do items? There's a whole theory of task analysis. Books have been written about this, critical incident theory, and work by a book by Jonathan, I think is his name, where you can study how actors act, what are the motivations, and what are the dependencies. Rolegrams are meant to help you discuss and analyze, break down your relationship with the work and your relationship with other people. So it's been useful to me. I just used one yesterday. We're talking with a colleague, consultant actually, not an SAP consultant, but a colleague who actually happened to be a friend of mine who's doing some work for eBay. And I said, check this out, Steve. I want to show you something. Let me tell you about what I do here as an engineering excellence lead, and what I think my relationship is with other teams. And it helped me quickly distill for him the essence of what I'm trying to do to make things better.
Yeah, that's just right, John. Rolegrams are focused on your relationship to each other as you do your work. So of course they're strongly related to task analysis. It's part of task analysis, but task analysis also does a bunch of other things and has other focuses on the processes of the work itself as opposed to who is doing it. So I'm sure this is all part of task analysis. We've just focused in on the relationship of people to their work and to each other in their work with Rolegrams.
Somebody else here has mentioned, my team are moving from waterfall to Scrum. What do you feel the key test roles need to be within a Scrum team?
Well, this depends on a number of factors. It depends on the kind of industry you're in. Is it a regulated industry? Is it an established product or some kind of startup where you're doing some brand new blue sky technology? So what you might have is you might have a sub-team of testers on your Scrum team. You might have just one tester on your Scrum team. You might have 0 testers on your Scrum team, and in either of those cases, reasonable things might happen, or it might go badly wrong. One thing I rarely see, and it's a shame, is a test manager. And a big risk of moving into Scrum, and this risk has been harming people all over the industry, is that you have testers on teams. Even if you have a testing role, you have testers on teams, but you have no test manager, or the test manager is way far away. And people go, oh, why is that a problem? You know, we're agile, we don't need managers. That's because test managers do something really important. Test managers take care of the pressure that's on the testers. They manage that pressure and make sure the pressure doesn't get too big. They make sure that the tester has all the equipment that they need, all the resources that they need. They make sure the tester is competent. They supervise the tester. Now you take a test manager out of that scenario, and that means every tester has to be self-managing, which is great if all of your testers are fully trained and sophisticated consultants who can stand up for themselves. I'm that way, and my brother John is that way. If you're going to hire us, that's fine. But there are lots of testers out there who they need management. They need leadership. And if the leadership is coming from people who don't care about testing, don't know about testing, what that typically leads to is that the testers just become junior developers doing junior developer type stuff, and goodbye deep testing. You're just going to end up with a bunch of shallow testing.
Something important to consider, as James just laid out that scenario, and we have triangles as tasks, right? Well, those are the tasks that you know about. Now, notice in your work that tasks emerge. They appear. There becomes a need to do something. And that's why Rolegrams may be important when it gets complicated, especially like, we just realized nobody is in charge of interviewing testers or new people on the team. We just kind of have to, I guess, you'll do, you show up for the interview loop. So you could as a tester, you can anticipate these things in that kind of scenario that think, well, wait, who's going to do the test report? Who's going to show up to the scrum of scrums if you're doing that notion? So there's what you know about and what emerges, and whatever emerges has to be dealt with somebody doing that particular task, or at least stewardship of that task.
And that means you're going to have a lot of initiative, John. Like when you started that USLA report thing, no one told you had to do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just saw a lot of bugs not getting fixed and I felt in a way that was timely. So we needed to come up with an agreement that said, here's an expectation our customers might have, and that's reasonable for our project teams.
All right, next question.
The next question here asks, how would you define the cross-functional team principle of Agile, considering all the things we've heard about roles?
I'm not sure what the cross-functional team principle is, other than are you saying that you have people in different roles that join together on one team? Well, that's what we were talking about. You mean you just have you have some circles, you have different roles, each one has a different rectangle, they're within a bigger rectangle representing the work of the entire team. Of course, you can have different people with different roles on the same team, and some would call that a cross-functional team. What I keep hearing associated with Agile, which is what concerns me, is when people aren't just saying cross-functional, they just say, we're all just members of the team, and there are no roles, there are no specialties, which seems to me patently absurd and utterly counter to the experience that we have all had in this industry. There are people, if you want to put it that way, then why not just say everyone on the team should be testers, and of course the testers should write the code too, and have the testers build the product. Just call everybody a tester, and everyone is a tester, and they're all trained as testers, and then they write the code and they create the product. Now, someone who believes in excellence in software development would say, hey, that's not going to work, because lots of people know how to code, but they aren't very good at coding. You have to really study and practice to be good at coding. So to be a developer in a matter of doing it excellently requires focus. It requires training. It requires learning. It requires experience. It requires motivation and passion. And then I say to them, that's exactly the same for testers too. So if you mean by cross-functional that you have a tester on the team and you have some developers on the team and you have a designer on the team or you have a coach on the team, that's just what we were talking about. If you mean something different when you say cross-functional, then I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay, let's take a look at another question here. This attendee says, don't you think that specialization from Rolegrams not only lowers the focus on the bigger picture, but will also lower testers' attention in his or her area of interest?
Yes, that is a risk. Now, don't you think the generalization makes you into a shallow person who can't do anything excellently? Because that's what I think. There's a problem with generalization, with being a generalist, and there's a problem with being a specialist. Derek, could you let me have the screen again, because I have a slide exactly about this, because I thought this would come up.
No
and
problem.
I couldn't. Okay. Meet Mr. Deep and Mr. Wide. I want to outline for you the problem, the challenge here. Here is a specialist, here is a generalist. And in each of these categories, here's how they see each other. The specialist, such as a tester, says, I'm dedicated, I'm responsible, I'm skilled and caring. Whereas that generalist is distracted all the time because he keeps doing a million different things. Unreliable because he never finishes a job unless it's a really, really simple job because he keeps getting interrupted. Incompetent because he never focuses and learns any one skill. He's got 100 half skills and he doesn't care. Now this is what the generalist says. The generalist says, but I'm available. I'm collaborative. I'm versatile and caring. Whereas that specialist guy, he's obsessed. He's territorial, he's narrow, and he doesn't care. Now here's the problem, really. The problem is that as a tester, I am a generalist tester. I do all kinds of testing. A security tester then looks at me and I'm one of those damn generalists. He says that I'm distracted, I'm unreliable, I'm incompetent, at least when it comes to security testing. He could very legitimately say James Bach is a dilettante of a security tester. He's only done security testing professionally just a few times. Well, I focus on it and I'm good at it, right? But the same exact issue happens between a tester and a team member. From the team member's point of view, the tester is a specialist. But the same exact thing happens between an entrepreneur and a team member. An entrepreneur might say, you agile guys, you're constantly doing your scrummy things and you're building software and you forget that what we're trying to do is change the world. We're trying to build this business and change the world. And you're just so specialized in your software development, you don't notice that. So how I'd like to address this question is to say that if you want to go deep, there's positives and negatives to that. If you want to be wide, that is to say versatile and collaborative and available to people, there are positives and negatives to that. Personally, I have chosen to specialize in testing, and that gives me access to depths of excellence in testing that are not achievable by other people, and I'm proud of that. And I'm willing to accept the downside that comes from that. But this is the thing that we've got to struggle with. And we need to be empathetic about. That's why I created this slide, because I'm trying to create an empathy that goes both ways.
Yeah.
As a specialist, I need to have empathy for generalists, and I hope that generalists will have some empathy for me as a specialist.
Yeah, I think even if you have a bunch of people or circles and tasks, triangles, and just you have a whole whiteboard full of just circles and triangles, no contracts, no squares, no squiggles, no nothing. And you say, well, we have all these people and we have all these tasks. Now go self-organize. You will find people who will want to be specialists, or even if they don't start off being specialists, become specialists in that area of code per se, or perhaps, that in 1 month or maybe 1 day makes them a de facto specialist. So this is just part of human interaction, and even with Agile and self-organizing team, you will have somebody who knows the code better than anybody else in a matter of hours or days, and that will make them a specialist in other people's eyes. So it's just one of those things that will emerge anyway. And this, I love this slide because it does help us with the social stigma of that natural emergence in humanity, people wanting to be specialists or wanting to be generalists.
Yeah, I just think you need to think, what is the focal point of my excellence? If you want to be excellent, and the excellence that you seek is excellence in collaboration, excellence in helping people work together, then you are going to be more of a generalist type of person. If you want to achieve technical excellence or analytical excellence, then that means you have to sweat the details of mathematics and software and tools to master those technical skills, and that's going to take you a lot of time. And that's going to take your time away from mastering other people's skills. And that's just the way the world works. That's why some people are farmers, and some people are accountants, and some people are lawyers, and all that sort of thing. Just look around you. Civilization operates on people with various levels of specialization, and that's the way it has to be. But of course, we can continue to question how much specialization we might need in a particular situation. Anyway, that's what we have to say about that.
All right, guys. We've gone about 15 minutes over there, and I think that was a lovely slide to kind of wrap things up on. So I just want to thank you both for taking the time out and doing this presentation. It was really interesting. There's lots of great feedback there. And for those of you who are asking, is this webinar recorded? Yes, indeed it is. And it'll be available over on the Test Huddle website very shortly. So that's it from us here today. And we hope you can join us tomorrow for 2 more webinars with Hive Shouts and Penny Resnick. So thank you again, James and John.
Yep. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, everybody. See you later.